One group which is urging Australians to vote no in tomorrow's referendum on the voice is the Black People's Union. Its president and Wandindian man, Keiran Stewart-assheton, joins me now. Good morning, Keiran. We just heard the Prime Minister then saying tomorrow is an opportunity to show kindness and to wake up on Sunday morning a better country. Why, as part of a group that's collectively been called the Progressive No's, do you not want to see that happen?
There's a whole bunch of reasons why. I think first and foremost, when we talk about it being an act of kindness, that kind of cuts straight to the heart of the Yes campaign. And they base it very much, their whole campaign's based very much upon faith and upon hope, as opposed to actual material change for First Nations people. Now, part of the reasons why we're so opposed to it is the implications on our sovereignty that this whole proposition poses. So, when we talk about constitutional recognition, which is essentially what the voice referendum is, we have to go right back to the 90s to actually see where this proposition comes from. Now, back in '97, BHP lobbied the John Howard government over the impacts First Nations land rights and First Nations sovereignty could have on their resource extraction. Then we see constitutional recognition birthed. Now, this is the third attempt that they've tried to push onto us. Third time they've tried to push this constitutional recognition onto us. We've rejected it the first two times, and they've come back again, this time wrapped up with this whole voice body.
It's hardly been pushed on you, though, is it, when you've had thousands of First Nations people join together, come up with the statement in Uluru? Are you dismissing their genuine feeling and belief that this is the right way?
Well, look, the thing is, we have to understand that there's a lot of false misrepresentations around the whole propaganda behind the Yes campaign. Now, they talk about this being an invitation from First Nations people, but it's not an invitation from First Nations people. The Referendum Council was set up back in 2015 by Tony Abbott, and it was originally, officially, fully created in 2017 by the Malcolm Turnbull government. Now, this Referendum Council are the ones that actually held these regional dialogues leading up to the Yalara Convention, where the Uluru Statement was signed. And they were the ones who actually were the architects behind the Uluru Statement. It wasn't a call from First Nations people. It was a proposition given to First Nations people as a take it or leave it opportunity. One
of the Yes campaigners we had on the program, Jade Ritchie, said to us earlier that, posed a question, how many decades do you go through seeing the failure to close the gap without actually doing something different? So for the Progressive No's, could this be a missed opportunity?
Well, that's actually a perfect point. How long are we going to keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result?
Well, with the Yes vote, they're saying it will be a different thing and a different result.
Yes, but we've had dozens of advisory bodies before, just like this one. Some of them even had a lot more power than this one. Previous advisory bodies have been able to manage their own programs and their own funding. This advisory body cannot even do that. All it can do is give representations to Parliament, same representations any individual business or organisation in Australia can already give. The Parliament's not compelled to act on these representations. We have to rely on their benevolence to do so. And when we look at stuff like the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody and their failure over the last 32 years to act on those recommendations, simple recommendations like remove hanging points from cells so people cannot hang themselves in a cell, when we look at their failures to act on these recommendations, why would we trust them to act on even more recommendations?
Well, and that is the point of the Progressive No's, that this is, you want action on the Bringing Them Home report and the Aboriginal Deaths in Custody Royal Commission. If the government ends up feeling that they've been unable to deliver the voice for Indigenous Australians, why do you think that you will have any greater success making headway with what you see as the priorities?
Our success has always come from our grassroots ground struggle. It's never been a top-down success that's come from the government. Every success that we've had throughout our history has been from our movements on the street. It's never been a gift from the Parliament. And that's
so what happens then come Sunday if the no vote and you are successful telling people not to accept the voice?
Hopefully then we can actually go back to the table and we can have proper conversations around stuff like land rights, around stuff like self-determination and around stuff like our sovereignty, which remains unceded here.
And do you think that you'll have some success with those conversations based on previous conversations?
Definitely, especially when we
Why are you optimistic?
Because this whole proposition came about as a way to undermine our grassroots struggles. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, we had such power on the streets pushing for stuff like land rights and self-determination. Then we were thrown this bone of constitutional recognition, and it's completely undermined all of our grassroots energy and struggle. Hopefully, in no means we can go back to having those conversations. We can go back to talking about truth-telling and about treaty and about, you know, actually changing the material conditions for First Nations people instead of just having more tokenistic advisory bodies.
What do you make of the debate that we've seen over the last 6 months in particular?
Look, honestly, it's a debate that Mob never even wanted. You know, we've been completely thrown under the bus here, regardless of the outcome tomorrow. Regardless of the outcome, you know, it's still going to be detrimental for First Nations people. Either we're going to end up with this tokenistic advisory body, which is going to undermine our struggle, or we're going to end up with, you know, this racist outcome of what's deemed as a racist no. And either way, you know, First Nations people aren't going to be helped by this referendum. We need to look beyond this referendum, and we need to look at actually organising properly to get some proper land rights and some proper, you know, gains towards self-determination. There's
been a bit of debate about Anthony Albanese saying that he wouldn't then legislate for the Voice. Lydia Thorpe, the senator, had indicated she'd back that, then she clarified and said no. Would you be looking for any legislation like that, or you just say anything to do with the Voice? Doesn't matter if it's the Constitution or legislation, it's not what you're after.
Look, unless the Voice has got power to actually do something, more than just give some tokenistic advice, I don't see any merit in having it in the first place. What we need is proper management over our own affairs. You know, black control over black affairs. That's what self-determination is. And when we look at all the health reports from around the world, all the education reports, you know, all the reports into oppressed people, we see that the number one best way for those people to reach equality is to give them control over their own affairs. So until we have control over our own affairs, we're going to keep remaining, you know, 10 times more likely to be homeless or incarcerated or to have our children removed, etc., etc.
Yeah, and you're making the point there, control is a lot different to being an advisory body.
Yes.
Keiran Stewart-assheton, thanks for coming in this morning and having a chat.
No worries at all. Thank you.